All right. So Kangmin Lee is not able to join us. He just hit me up. Something came up last minute. So this will be our panel. So we can actually get started. Um, so I want to thank everybody so far who's joined us. This is what I call a good face space, Twitter space that I hold every Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. with different topics, different panels, um, about different things that kind of come to mind and I want to actually discuss with uh, people that I'm fans with on Twitter. So before we get into the topic, let's introduce everybody. So, Kris, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, man, I'm Kris Williams, live in the great state of Texas. Um, I'm an apologist. I do music. Nothing really too fancy here, man. That's a little bit about me. Married for 6 years, probably the most proud of that. But yeah, that's about me.
All right, we'll go to Mr. Hardhat Intellectual.
What's going on, everybody? Um, my name's Hardhat, but my real name is Josh. Just sling concrete for a living and read philosophy books on the side. And that's pretty much it.
And hopefully soon to be author.
Yeah, that too. That too for sure.
All right, and Tickles, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, most call me Tickle or T. It was a nickname from childhood, but I also like to tickle minds with the things that I post. I do a lot of political memes and commentary, and I have an extensive political background, so I can bring little rainbows of that towards conversations. And I live in Houston, Texas. I'm originally from South Africa. I'm one of those rare legal immigrants that you come across every now and again. And so I can speak about the truth behind how immigration should work and when it does work, what it actually brings to the table. I'm an extremely proud American. And I love it when people are on spaces with me and then they say, "Well, you're not American." And then I say, "I chose to become one. I wasn't an accident." So I bring a lot of sarcasm too. Hope that helps. Any questions, feel free to ask.
All right, appreciate it. And I'll just introduce myself. My name's Adam Coleman. I'm the author of a book called Black Victim, Black Victor, which gives social commentary about race while telling my personal story. I'm also the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing, uh, where I, advocate for free speech with intellectual thought. And so I invite people who want to write articles, and I write articles myself. So that's a little bit about myself. Obviously I host this every week and occasionally doing public speaking engagements. So we'll get into the topic, nihilism and the value of life. Um, this is a topic that can go in many different directions. I'm open to different directions, but part of the reason why I wanted to talk about it, I came up with this topic a while ago, and I remember thinking about there was a number of protests that were happening about abortion and the right to abort and the kind of back and forth. And granted, these were just like extreme videos, but I remember watching videos of women who were excited for abortion, and I just started thinking about all these different things that were coming up where years ago there was no disillusion that abortion was ending a life. But now it's this consistent ending of moral principles, or making morality subjective, or even just saying that's not really a life. And I just started thinking about these same type of people seem to be very nihilistic. Um, there's no particular regard for life, uh, no particular value. They just kind of, I don't know, pessimistic about everything, very down and out. And I noticed like there's something when it comes to the age of these people. They're typically younger, and I may be off balance. I'm not the biggest philosopher in the world or anything, but I'm just like I'm looking at what's around me, and I'm noticing certain patterns. So I'll go to Kris. Kris, do you see anything similar as to what I'm expressing?
Absolutely. I do college ministry, and this was a few years back at a local college campus here, where I like to engage students and see what people are thinking and have a battle of worldview. So we were having a conversation, and this young lady admitted to being a nihilist. Um, Ironically enough, she was taking college campuses and had great passions about helping people, which I think is the ironic thing about nihilism. But um, related to that in abortion, I mean, if nihilism being radically skeptic, there's no foundation for things like objective truth and subjectivity. I guess it's consistent with their ideology on why. I mean, why should a baby, have the, I guess, right to enter into human life if nothing ultimately matters and things like that. But no, I think you're right on the nail with that.
Tickles, what do you think?
Well, I mean, ultimately, nihilism is based in skepticism, extreme pessimism, and racial radical skepticism. And a true nihilist believes in nothing. They have no loyalties, no purpose other than the perhaps every now and again the impulse to destroy. And this is where we're at, in my opinion, where we're at today. The belief system that nihilism brings with it is that it has really no objective meaning whatsoever, and they are profound with that. So it's almost as though the nihilist that doesn't believe in anything actually does believe in something. So it's kind of a mishmash of clarity that I see, and we're without a doubt seeing this now multiply exponentially, and it's egregious to society in a whole and in a general. And it's not just abortion. It it's now we're annihilating children from being children, and from children just being able to behave like children. And we're so the nihilists now are removing childhood, not just pre-birth but now post-birth, and that I believe is a massive pattern of self-destruction for all of us, because it doesn't just affect the people that are making those decisions, it affects all of society, and it bleeds through. And this is where we do look for our faith to support us, and whatever our faith may be, we look for support and to be invigorated via our faith. And we have less and less and less of that going on too, and we have the ultimate destruction of people that openly are of faith, and constant attacks and ridicule. And then we see more of that coming forth from the distinct nihilists and how they behave. So in order for them not to believe in something, then I believe that they have to believe in that. So therefore they do believe in something.
That's interesting. Mr. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah. This topic's pretty interesting because there is a sense of nihilism, but it's also a collective form of nihilism. And what I mean by that is, they all have a motive behind this nihilism, the traits that go along with it. And if you look at it, right, they all have like a political agenda behind abortion, but a nihilist is all for themselves. And there are people who believe in nothing. Like I'm not religious myself, but I'm not a nihilist. I believe that I came from nothing. I remember nothing before I was born, and I'm probably not going to remember nothing when I'm gone. And that's just my own personal belief on my view of life. But I also go amongst my life in a very reasonable manner. I have morals and ethics just like anyone else. So, I think they're twisting and turning a lot of nihilism and using it to their advantage. I think it's a combination of many things. There's a little postmodernism in there, or how they manipulate the language. And I think, a lot of it has to do with education. A lot of people are just not, they really don't have any understanding. They know something's wrong, but they really don't grasp it in depth, if that makes any sense. But as far as nihilism, I mean, it's tricky to call it just like specifically nihilism. I think it's a little more than that because it is a collective agenda at the end of the day.
So I guess my question is, why is it becoming more prevalent? Anybody can jump in.
Well, I would think, a lot of it has to do with the postmodern and the combination of things. You could throw a little Kant in there too, because everyone has their own truth now. Everyone's truth is their own. So even if other people have different truths or a collective truth, everyone still holds their own personal truth. So it's almost like a narcissist. It's like a generation of narcissists in a sense, but all just jumping on whatever is the trending topic, whatever is the trending fad. They just go along with the flow. Because if you think about abortions, right, abortion is a very touchy subject and they are wish-washy on it. And I think that the only stance to really, address abortions would be one in which you'd have to take a practical stance. I don't think we'll ever stop abortions fully. I'm against them. Yes, I don't like them, but I don't think they'll ever be stopped. But there's other ways to slow them down. Like I like to point out the fact that why do we put so much emphasis and stress on abortions alone? Why can't we limit the need for abortions? Why is that the first go-to? Why don't we teach responsibility? Why are we not looking at how this affects relationships between men and women, marriages, things like that? How can we find other outs instead of just going straight to abortions? And I think they manipulate that in a sense when they use that nihilism and the postmodernism, and I think it's pretty much along the lines of that. A little bit of Kant in there too, for sure.
Anybody want to jump in as to why?
I think we've that nihilism ultimately was based on fatalism, and of course it goes originally back to early 1900s with the Russian Empire, and it was a sense of doom. And I think we're here again in that sense of doom. And I think a lot of people are just wrapped up in an orchestrated depression, and they don't realize it. And it's not the clinical sense of depression; it's a situational depression. And with that comes a sense of, well, what's the point? What's the point? What's the point? And we've reached this now at levels that we've never seen in our recent history. And so everyone has got to find something because we're now dealing with at least two generations of adults, young adults as they are, but yeah, adults who were given trophies for essentially nothing. And the problem with doing that is you remove goals, you remove the desire to create personal achievements. And so therefore it becomes static for their lives, because when all of these participation trophies and rewards and good job, good job, good job, when there was no good job, has reached their level of a sense of apathy, which is so high within these trophy kids that they have to find something else. And therefore they latch onto each other now. And so whomever has, the trending story, the trending behavior, all of now the pronoun things and et cetera, that go along with that, it is all part of fads and trends when, I'm just turned 40, and, I remember trends in my school were mostly clothes for girls or haircut designs, um, or a certain type of pair of shoes or sneakers. And we still live with some of that culture, but it's gone a step further now. It's gone several steps further, and it has become a fad and a trend to be essentially a doomsday kind of a person, because they have nothing else. They were given so much as children, and now as adults, they don't know how to achieve anything. So instead of actually achieving anything personally, they go about it now in a cluster of achievements and attach themselves to whomever, whatever is going on that day, that week, that month, that year. And this is a very dangerous time to be a young person because, of course, we know the influences around them essentially are one another. And so when you've got a group of people that are saying, yes, do this because it's a good thing to do, ultimately it's not a good thing to do in the bigger picture. But sadly, the influences direct them in those areas. And now we've got a lot of dissatisfaction, I think would be a good word to use, with a couple of generations that are just latching on to the next trend. And some of these trends are beyond dangerous and can be fatal for so many. And I do mean death for so many of them. And of course, when we look at what COVID has done over the last, well, now we're in year 3, what it has done to the 12 to 18-year-olds and even younger, as far as the suicide rates, I think that kind of proves what I'm saying. We've overextended children's lives to become adult too quick.
Interesting. Kris, you were going to say something?
Yeah, man, that was both good. But I would piggyback on both of those thoughts and say, nihilism is kind of coming popular really because of this increase of postmodern thought. One, but also that we don't, and I mean we as in our culture, we don't have this transcendentness anymore. And what I mean by that is this: we are the center of the world. There is no higher being than us. There's no created order. I remember when I was growing up, the thought of like being the center of the world was like condemned, right? Like, when you were being a little brat, your parent or teacher would teach you, hey, life is not about you. But that is literally opposite of today's culture. Like, we are the highest being. There's no created order of what to be or what ought not to be. That's why, people can become boys if they want to be a boy. You want to be a werewolf, you could just be a werewolf. And that's what I would argue is the loss of transcendentness in our culture. And so I think that's very important. I mean, obviously, I would argue for the Christian God and him being the most transcendent being there is. And so, I mean, I'm sure people have different perspectives, but more than willing to discuss that. But no transcendentness at all. And I don't think a postmodern worldview can give that. And so that's what I would argue.
So one thing that kind of comes to mind for myself when I think of the let's just be specific as far as like the younger generation and having this feeling like a nihilistic kind of like you said, doomsday viewpoint. I almost think like this is almost like an affluent mindset. Kind of like what Tickle said. You get trophies, you get everything that you want. That's I hate to use this word because it's bastardized, but that's kind of like a privileged kind of situation. If you're a lower middle class kid who has to work hard to build up and become somebody, it's harder to look at the world as, as like, woe is me, because you've been able to learn skill sets, you've been able to grow. But what if you are already affluent? You've been handed a gift and you don't even appreciate that gift. You don't even realize it's a gift. So I wonder if this nihilism kind of viewpoint, I know we talked about postmodernism. A lot of these kids who learn postmodernism, they're learning from colleges, which is a relatively affluent institution, right? It's not the working class institution. So it's strange because it's like the generation that is the most fortunate sees no fortunateness in their situation. They are constantly being berated for their privilege. If you want to use like the postmodern view on things, they're being berated for their privilege. And then if they don't feel that they have a privilege and they feel like they're following all the steps and they're not getting the outcome that they were promised because they've been handed everything relatively so throughout their life, then it's like, well, why even bother? And I don't think it helps when we have, certain social media platforms that feed off of anger, outrage, negativity, and the young brain is taking that in, especially like a teenage brain. They're taking that in for their their young adult life into college, and then they're in college and they're getting fed all this negativity about society and how things may look good, but underneath it's evil, right? So it's kind of like, well, what's the point, you know? So I don't know. I could be just talking a lot of shit, but I just think about the how it's kind of like an affluent feeling because there are poor people who might feel down and out and just be like whatever, but this particular movement seems to be of an affluent nature. That's kind of like the vibe that I get. Anybody can jump in.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And the thing is with this whole thing is that they also need like a bad guy. They need like a narrative to also keep it going and keep it fluid. Because without a bad guy, without any villain in their whole world viewpoint, they have nothing to really strive for, and that's what makes it a collective movement. Because you can have that nihilism aspect, you can have that postmodern aspect, you can have whatever ideology you want to mix in there, but they have a collective goal, and that collective goal is formulated around some villain, some white supremacist villain, or some overprivileged population, and it's their fault that everything is down, or the unvaccinated. And that's the narrative that keeps them driving. And I think that's a major factor that also comes into play.
That's a good point. So like if we were to say, imagine you're a young woman in college and you become a feminist and you think to yourself, well, why bother doing all these extra things when the patriarchy is going to prevent me from getting equal pay and all these other things. So that's something that kind of comes to mind as well. Tickles, you want to jump in?
Yeah, this is exactly in a broader sense where we're at. I see the selfishness, the greed, the self-centeredness. To use the word narcissist might not cover all of it, but of course, when we look at the DSM and explain what that is, that there's several forms of narcissism, but I see it as a form of great selfishness. Great selfishness. Very few people now, quote unquote, love thy neighbor, consider their neighbor, think of their neighbor. We've reached levels of tolerance, and I've said for many years that tolerance becomes permission, and permission then becomes a habit. So once lines are crossed, it will the line will be consistently crossed, and then the next line, the next line, the next line, and so on down the road. And we've reached levels of where we've tolerated these behaviors, and instead of correcting them when they start in young people, they're indulged. They're constantly being indulged, and it's this indulging and this tolerance, i.e. permission, where we've come undone, because we've indulged so many negative behaviors. And once upon a time it was do that and I'm going to smack you, because gosh, heaven forbid you actually slap a child across its ass anymore. But you know I'm not that old, but I can assure you I got a few slaps. But we I was not indulged into negative behavior. It wasn't tolerated in my family. And of course, growing up in South Africa, we had a lot of political strife, we had a lot of life strife, and perhaps we were raised with different standards and morals, and it wasn't such an easygoing thing to go through on a daily basis with everything that was around us. And so we've we don't conform, or we don't encourage our children to conform about caring about anyone else but themselves. And that, I believe, has raised the stakes of these nihilists and narcissists, if you want to call them that. But I just call them self-indulgent and extremely selfish people. and no more so than when you either sitting in a coffee shop or on an airplane or a bus or any public event, movie theater, and somebody pulls out their phone and starts yelling down it, or blasting music when everyone's got a headset nowadays. Or in the movie theater, they turn on their phones and the person's sitting right in front of you, so it distracts you from what's going on the screen. These things, they might seem little and unimportant, but it grows into a form of tolerance. Again, tolerance becomes permission, becomes a habit, and it's self-indulgent. And we've gone wrong somewhere in allowing our children. By the way, I don't have any, but so perhaps I can see it a little bit clearer from the outside looking in, of the indulgences that are allowed on children now, encourages them to become so self-centered, and you know there isn't a third party for them to look to. They don't have generations of family around them anymore. They don't have places of faith to attend, or services, or even in their own home, to help them understand that they are the sum of many parts. They're not just the only person here. And that is where I see the crossroads that we've reached now. And when we certainly look at the youth that were involved with Antifa, and the youth that have been so destructive in the last 3 or 4 years, we have to come back to, again, they think that they're working towards a bigger group, which is not how nihilists work. So I find the overall behavior to be questionable along the lines of exactly what is their end goal, because ultimately they've destroyed things for themselves and not just everyone else.
So I'll go to Kris in a moment, but I wanted to interject for a second. So, you know, you said something that triggered a thought in my head. I've thought about this before. Why are we placating the most unstable, the most disrespectful people within our society? Because we have a society of cowards. People who are unwilling to look someone in the face and say, you're being absolutely unreasonable, right? We have HR departments filled with people who are willing to disbelieve what they are seeing in their face and saying, you must now play this invisible game with everybody else. Pretend that this person is something that they're clearly not, just to make them feel better. We have the most emotionally unstable people who are acting in a way that if they want support, most people are willing to give them support. Most people are nice enough to hear them out, nice enough to say, okay. But now we have people who have taken their emotional baggage and turned it into being some sort of right to be heard, and their right to be absolutely aggressive and disrespectful and narcissistic, you name it. And I just feel like we have this cowardice population. I truly believe that the vast majority of Americans are generally apolitical or minimally political. They're just average people who just want to go to work, come home, raise their kids, right? And then we have this loud few that we are kind of put back on our heels because we're not used to these loud few people who are filled with conspiracy theories, who are filled with anger and resentment based off of stuff that they're inventing for themselves. They've been convinced that there's these underpinnings within our society that's kept them from feeling abnormal. And now they're trying to fight back against these things when no one is trying to fight them. And everybody has become utter fucking cowards. And I'll include myself into that a little bit because I didn't say anything for a period of time. Granted, things got really crazy within the past 2-3 years, but I didn't say anything, right? I didn't feel it was my place. But now I'm saying something. This is the right time for us to be having these particular conversations because the activists, the most egregiously irritating people that exist within our society, they now get the ear of our president. They get on television. They get their own television shows. You have all these people who are the ills of our society, who are unhealthy, who are preaching that you need to be what they are. They are utterly unhappy people who are telling us that they should be like them. It's it's sick people who are saying sickness is fun, right? It's something that's extremely detrimental to our society. And I feel like we've been so cowardice to allow these people to have such a loud voice and give a shit about what they say. It used to be you had to earn a voice. Now we just give them a voice. Why? Because we feel bad. Why do we feel bad? Why feel bad when you did nothing wrong? So that's my little rant. I just wanted to say that. Kris,
I'd like,
the floor is yours.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, you can go ahead.
excuse me. I just wanted to throw in while you're on that area. I was at a store earlier on this afternoon, and I was crossing through the children's department, clothing-wise, little girls' clothes, as I was going to my destination in the store. And I noticed she was maybe about 4 or 5 years old, and she was picking up all these T-shirts off a folded rack, shelving, and she's just throwing them all over the place. And I just stopped and looked at her, and I gave her the look that I used to get from my grandmother. And I looked at her, and she suddenly looked at me, and she stopped. And I pointed at what she'd thrown to the floor, and then I pointed over to the shelf. And I did it 3 different times. I pointed at the products on the floor, pointed at the shelf she'd taken them from. And she picked them all up. Not a word was spoken. But her mother was off, with her back towards her, not looking. I could have been a very evil person and just taken that kid. Of course, it's all on camera, but those are the possibilities nowadays. I'm not quiet, and I do stand up, and I do speak up too, because quite frankly, I don't care what a stranger thinks of me. Because the chances, especially in Houston, the 3rd largest city in the country, I'm probably never going to see that mother again. So I don't care what she's going to say to me. But I do care about what her child is doing at that moment more than she does. Definitely more than she did. And as the kid was picking them up and putting them back on the shelf, the mother turned around and saw what she was doing and praised her. And the little girl looked at me, and I looked back, and I gave her a little bit of a smile and a wink. And her mom was there telling her how good she'd done, how nice it was for her to do that. So the intervention, silent or not, from a perfect stranger, just giving this kid the look, and most of us know what the look is, because we've had it probably many times in our lives. And a silent action can go so far. And now that child has been praised. The mother didn't know that the kid had thrown all the stuff all over the floor, but the mother caught her doing a good deed and praised her. And hopefully that praise will stick. So next time she might even see some things on the floor and now automatically pick them up and get the correct praise. So there's an art to correction, and it's very difficult. And I was in my own spaces a few nights ago, and an individual came in, and it had nothing to do with the topic, and he constantly does this, and he obviously needs a lot of attention, and suddenly announces he's gender fluid. So I asked him what that meant. What does that mean? Explain that to me. A little bit like Matt Walsh did the other day with the Dr. Phil show. Explain what that means to me. And he just kept saying, well, I'm gender fluid. You should know what it is. I don't. This is not an attack. Could you please explain it to me? And his explanation was rather interesting. And he said, well, I work a very masculine job, but sometimes I don't feel masculine to do my job. Okay. So you have days of personal and self-doubt. You have days where you don't feel confident. You have days where you may even feel weak. Do I have this correct? Yes. I said, well, guess what? I do too. I feel the same way. I have days where I don't feel very confident. I certainly have days where I feel like I'm just wasting my time, and that no one is listening or hearing or, taking guidance that they've asked for. I feel that way too. So does that make me less of a woman or more of a man? Because I also have days where I feel extremely confident and very overt and very forward. So does that make me masculine? And does that make me then gender fluid, using the terms and descriptions given? Oh, you don't understand. So, well, I think I've got it right from what you explained to me. But how does that make it gender fluid? We all have those days where we feel less than ourselves and we doubt ourselves, we question ourselves, we wonder if we're on the right track, doing the right things. We've all experienced that, and we'll have many more times experiencing it along our route to destiny. And of course, with that moment, he left the room. But you know, I wasn't attacking the young man. I was asking for clarity, and if that is what gender fluid is all about, then I think we should all stick our hands up in the air right now and say, "Hey, that's me too," because there was no explanation in the fullest sense of what this actually means beyond the normal human experience of self-doubt.
Right. Kris, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, man, you said something that really piqued my curiosity as far as why do we placate to someone's worldview? And I think you were spot on when you said ultimately we're cowards, you know. And but I think our culture, not only are we cowards, our culture raises cowards, and cowards are viewed as virtuous. You know, because if you state to someone, "Hey, I don't believe you're a female," or "I don't believe this about you," I believe this, right? You're viewed as the mean guy, and the one who placates to someone's worldview is actually viewed as virtuous. Um, you know, but sometimes many times it takes someone to speak out to embolden others, and I think that's what's important. You know, what we're doing now is important to, because sometimes I'll see a video or I hear somebody speak, and I'm like, man, that's right. And, you know, why wouldn't I say that? You know, because I've been silent at times about the truth, and you know, speaking out in the culture. And sometimes it's taken, because like about all the woke stuff, the critical race theory. For a while, I was just quiet. I didn't want my friends to not think I was black enough, or whatever it was. And I just saw other people speaking out, and I was like, man, I got to, you know. And so for me, it emboldened me, and sometimes it takes others to embolden others as well.
Absolutely. You know, Tickles brought up, you know, how she was asking questions and it was coming off as an assault. And I don't think I don't think we value questioning things, at least in the past couple of years, like I used to see. There was never any there was never a problem with asking a question, especially if your tone is right, and you're not being antagonizing. You can ask a question about something. Um, but there's been this level of conformity within the past couple of years. I would say even more so surrounding COVID, because there's been a lot of forcing of people to conform to either a narrative, a behavior, all these different things. And I think that has that has taken away the motive for people to question the world around them. So when someone comes to you who looks unhealthy, I don't think people understand, like, we are able to tell when someone is unhealthy, and we just feel it. You know, it would be like if someone is anorexic, you can just visually look at them and say that something is wrong with them. You can see that they're off. You know, they look unhealthy. There is something about someone who has a certain speech pattern, a certain behavioral pattern, certain tics in their face. Um, you know, I'm someone who's always watching people, you know, whether they make eye contact, you know, all these different things. And we clearly have unhealthy people who have a microphone, who are saying certain things. And I want to make clear, I am not saying that you shouldn't be cordial to people. You should always be respectful of people, even if they have a particular condition. What I'm talking about is giving unhealthy people power, because especially if they feel that they've been marginalized, once they get that power, they're generally abusive with it because they don't know. Well, for one, they didn't earn that power, right? It used to be people who were powerful, or at least powerful in the sense of getting notoriety, had earned their way to getting notoriety. And now it's people who just scream the loudest who get the notoriety. And I don't think that is healthy for our society. And it's stifled, our lack of questioning has stifled asking, why are these people getting the microphone at all? Why are they so loud? And I think with the level of conformity that we've been displaying within the past couple of years, the unwillingness to question things, it's let the people who are willing to shout as loud as possible, who are generally the most unhealthy within our society, who are generally the most narcissistic people, you know, you have an imbalance of dialogue, an imbalance of viewpoints. It's a complete imbalance of power hungry people who are dictating our culture. And we can, you know, get started with corporations who placate to the same people. 13 people on Twitter could complain about something to a company, and next thing you know, they want to change their policy because they want to be inclusive. It's that level of ridiculousness that would have never existed 10 years ago, for example. So anybody can jump in.
Just talking about, yeah, placating. Fantastic word. I love good words. Coming up on the 7th year now of being a widow. When my husband passed, and it was sadly a long demise, upon the, I prefer to call it celebration of life. However, some people call it a wake. Whichever phrase you wish to use is perfectly acceptable by me. Use your own language. That's okay. You should. And my nephew, through marriage, decided, he pulled me over in the house where all the relatives were. And I don't have that many relatives this side of the ocean. So the majority, of course, were my husband's family. And my nephew pulled me aside, and I think he was about maybe 16 or so at the time. And he said, "Auntie, do you mind if I use this moment while all the family is together to come out?" And I said, "I do mind. And you're not going to do that because today is not about you. You find other arrangements to get the family together and do your coming out party then. No one's going to knock you for it. No one's going to criticize you. However, today is not about you. Today is about your uncle. And the family has come together for your uncle, not to hear you speak, and actually not even really to hear me speak. We come together to celebrate your uncle's life and to be grateful for what he brought to us and for the life that we enjoyed with him. Not to talk about your life. You're not going to derail based on your sense of self." And he hasn't spoken to me since. And he never did come out. And he just got engaged to a woman. So, over 6.5 years ago, he could have completely dominated that entire event based on wanting to be the center of attention. And again, it's gratuitous, and I wouldn't give in to it. I wouldn't indulge him. And this is where, some people think that I'm cold and mean and horrible. I really don't care, and I mean that. This is my life, and as they, them, his, her, zim, zers, whatevers, say the same thing. Well, this is my life. Yes, and this is mine. And I will conduct my life according to how I wish to, and be a kind, caring person as and when, and stand up for myself as and when, as should we all. However, you don't get to cross those boundaries, and I have very firm boundaries. You don't get to cross my boundaries, and I will stand and make sure that you don't. And this is the level of self-gratification that we're dealing with now, with especially the younger people. And again, I'm not massively old, but at the same time, I can certainly see where the corner has been turned, where this indulgence now has just become an expectation of where we just accept it and don't say anything. Well, some people have heard about the boiling frog theory, where you have a cold pot of water and you put a frog in it and you slowly boil it to death. Or you can be already a frog and it's a boiling pot of water, you put a frog in it and they'll jump straight out. And over the last couple of decades, we've been slowly boiled into the tolerance and acceptance of this gratuitous life that has been essentially forced upon us now. And we can say no, and we can stand up. But everyone's so scared of the ramifications. And as you said, you know, Peter Dinklage, he's a short person, and I believe he was in a series called Game of Thrones. I never watched the show. But he's making a loud noise against Disney redoing The Seven Dwarfs. And Disney thought that, this was something that they should listen to. So now they're actually looking at cancelling the project. And instead of putting in the fairy story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because one actor who essentially is famous for doing Elf and famous for being in Game of Thrones is making a noise. But what about the people he's just put out of work? What about the actors of similar stature to him that are now not going to get those jobs? So, the ripple effect of one person standing up and screaming is much bigger than they realize sometimes, because he's just taken away job opportunities for hundreds of people, whether they're actors of his same stature or not. And I welcome, quite frankly, having this being remade the exact same way that it was meant to be from the origin, because it actually puts people of short stature in front of the audience, in front of children, and makes it more visually acceptable and understanding. It gives an opportunity of learning. So he stunted all of that by screaming out. And Disney are actually now reconsidering based on one person.
Josh, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, that's those are all interesting points. And another thing I think that's severely overlooked is the fact that they made it, and they actually structured, the whole entire situation where people didn't have to really worry too much about the ramifications from the actions of a lot of these people. You could go to the rent freezes, you can go to a lot of these things. Yeah, they could have said that they were for COVID, and I'm not saying that a lot of them weren't. But that ultimately allowed people to become comfortable with the situation that we are in now. And I think they need to somehow, keep clouding people and blanketing them with that comfort, because there are a lot of people who are uncomfortable. And it's not just people that you would think are average people. For example, I work concrete. It's a very diverse group of men. You have Spanish, Black, Portuguese, you name it. These are rough men. None of them agree with any of the stuff that's going on right now. They actually have utter disdain for it. But you wouldn't know it because, you don't see that on the media. You don't see that side of it, but it is there. That element is very real. It exists. And I don't think people really truly grasp how dangerous this game that they're playing could actually turn out. Because if you have a group, a population of men, right, rough, tough, backbreaking men, who out of nowhere spontaneously become a collective due to all of these absurd policies, all of these pushes, all of these constant woe is me, I'm the victim, they might just go, well, you know what, since you're saying you're the victim, what does it matter now? And that's dangerous. But I think there we do have a population of cowards, absolutely, 100%. And it is our faults to blame for it. I wasn't always politically inclined like I am now either. But I do think there are a population of men who will stand up to this. And I do think they do have to maintain that blanket, that cloud of comfort. Because when things really get harsh, when things really get bad, to the point where people are like, all right, this is going too far, people will take action. People will start to motivate and get busy. And I think they're trying to prolong that as long as possible to implement more and more absurd policies until people actually finally catch on.
Absolutely. Kris, did you want to jump in?
There's a quote that I really like, and it's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times, and I think that's literally the motto of this culture. You really see one's character in these times, and so yeah, I really enjoy that quote. So I didn't want to speak too long, but hopefully that was helpful.
I was just gonna use that same quote.
Great minds think alike.
I was just going to say the exact same thing. It's cyclical. It really is cyclical, and I don't think we've ever actually seen this particular cycle ever of weakness on all sides. Weakness not to stand up against it. Weakness not to say, "Oh, stop it." Um, that was two words that I heard so many times in my childhood. Stop it. Yeah, I'm a little redhead, so it just it just reminds me of the things that I used to hear all the time. Stop it! Will you stop that? Um, and we don't. I don't know. We've lost something of where we stand up and say, "That's ridiculous. Just knock it off." And there's a young teacher, a substitute teacher, that claims that she was fired recently because she wouldn't meow at a second grader who was claiming to be a kitten either that day or that week. And the teacher refused to meow and utter her language in the sense of cat speak, whatever that is. And subsequently, the teacher claims that she lost her job. And of course, we don't really know if that's 100% accurate. It's a claim that the young woman made. So I'll just go along with that. But just the topic alone of that, and again, indulging. How many 5, 6, 7 year olds, especially the 5 and 6 year olds, and even a bit younger than that, claim they can fly that day? One of my cousin's little kids, for nearly a year, dressed with a little cape on his back, thinking he was part of I can't remember the name now, the dog cartoon. Is it Paw Patrol, I believe? Um, and he wore a little cape for nearly a year. But at no time did he think he was a dog. He just liked the cartoon show. And he was pretending to be I guess there's a police officer dog or something. And one of them wears a cape. That's fine and dandy, but don't let the kid think it's a cat. So, it's a cat this week, it'll be a dinosaur next week. And the week after that, it's going to be an astronaut. And then, you know, um, all the kids that used to run around in astronaut helmets and, didn't actually think that they could fly to space. And no one indulged them into thinking that. And this is where we as a society and even individually need to, pull our shorts up and say, stop it. Just stop it. Okay, you're a cat today. Go ahead, but I'm not meowing back to you. And I'm going to make you explain to me using words what you actually are saying. Because if you're a cat, then you're a magical cat and you can talk. Because magical cats can talk. And that's okay to have that little fantasy for that child. That's perfectly okay. But to indulge the child into thinking it's actually a cat is psychotic. It's absolutely psychotic. And it will lead to psychosis in our children. And this is what we're seeing is the adult versions of the indulgence that was offered to them in their very early years. And now we're surrounded, absolutely surrounded by battalions of them that are now claiming this sex, that sex, no sex, in between. Oh, good grief. Who indulged you into this? And why are you accepting of this, parents? Especially when they're telling us that 5-year-olds are transgendered. Yeah, well, I was a very big tomboy in my younger years, climbing trees higher than most of the boys in my family and running around. My mother insisted I wear dresses and climbing to the top of that tree, looking like Pippi, the typical Pippi Longstocking. That didn't make me grow up to be transgendered or even confused. And I don't remember ever saying, I wish I was a boy. I remember thinking it would be easier sometimes. And I still do every now and again. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be a man any moment. And I'd be one of the shortest men you'd ever seen anyway. But at 5'1", 5'2", I can barely get to 5'6" if I wear 4-inch heels, and which I do indulge myself in frequently just to achieve that 5'5" or higher status that I would love to have naturally. But we, you know, a little bit of humor has to come in to all of this, and not to mock people, but essentially to say, who the hell do you think you are? Everyone wants to talk about all these transgendered now. Well, there's XX and there's XY. So if we're trusting the science that we keep hearing about and have heard now for 3 years, trust the science, then I'm trusting the science that says biological is XX and XY. That's the science.
So I want to throw a word in that I don't think a lot of people use, but I think it fits into what we're talking about. And it's a word that I always think about. The word is boundaries. And I feel like there is a lack of respect for boundaries in general. So, there's boundaries of values, right? So, some of us believe in certain things that others don't, but we respect each other and respect our boundaries in regards to our faith. We respect each other's personal space. That's a boundary. There's a general lack of respect for boundaries within our society, and one of those boundaries is life. So if we were to go back to the abortion topic, for example, like that, there was a clear boundary of understanding that life is being ended, right? I'm a former liberal, and even I understood the ramifications that was happening. There was no disillusion that boundary of life was being crossed. And what I'm seeing, and it was especially alarming, is that boundary has disappeared and it's become make-believe as far as arguing the most nonsensical things just so we don't have that boundary of life. It's just a clump of cells. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't feel it. Just nonsensical concepts, just to validate the ending of, or to validate the process of abortion. And I don't know, it's something that I think about all the time. I feel like the most disrespectful people within our society have no boundaries. The most sexually promiscuous person generally has no boundaries sexually. They don't have boundaries for their personal sake, for how they represent themselves. A criminal has no boundaries as to whether he hurts people, takes from people, steals, violates people. He doesn't respect any boundaries. And now we have members of our government who don't respect the boundaries of the American people and what they've earned, because they care about themselves. There is no respect of boundaries for what people consider to be valuable. You have the Marxists who think property doesn't, my property isn't really my property. It's not worth anything. There's no boundary for me to have within my own property, right? So you have no property rights, which means there's no boundary around my home, and I have no right to protect myself within that boundary because that boundary doesn't exist to them, right? So there is nothing, and I guess that kind of goes back a little bit into the nihilism part. There's no value because values have boundaries, right? There's right and wrong. Well, they say, well, truth is objective or subjective, right? My truth is different than your truth. And it's this convolution of words and the word salads that they throw at you to try and confuse you, ultimately, so that you are okay with having no boundaries in life, in society. You say that you're one thing, and we don't respect the boundaries of science anymore when it comes to gender, so that's what you are. Because your truth, that's your truth. Truth is subjective. It doesn't really matter. There is no boundaries with anything, from their perspective. And I think that we've all been convinced that we have selective boundaries, selective truths, right? Everything is all about perspective. And we're supposed to be all wishy-washy and flowy about our morality. right? Morality, you've heard people who've heard morality subjective. They say that so that you don't have solid boundaries in your moral principles, right? So right is right, wrong is wrong. But when people start to convince you that, well, sometimes right can be wrong, or vice versa, they're trying to get you to alter your boundaries, your moral principles. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of gaslighting, a lot of convincing of people to change who they are, to change how they see things. You know, freedom of speech. Generally, everybody respected. It was the fringe that didn't respect it. Now they're saying, well, speech can be dangerous, right? So we don't respect the boundaries of speech anymore, right? For me to express myself in a particular way. So that's one word I think we should all kind of keep in mind. It's this dissolving of boundaries that I think the most extreme in our society are trying to convince us to dissolve. They're trying to have us get rid of it. And once we do that, then our society starts to break apart. You know, you can look at, the growing acceptance, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The want to have a growing acceptance of adults having sex with minors, right? There is a clear boundary that we had for the age of 18. And I know certain states have 17 or something like that. But generally speaking, it was not acceptable for someone who's a clear adult to have sex with someone under the age of 18. And there's a boundary that's there. And they're trying to get us to dissolve that particular boundary so that we become more accepting of the sickest within our society, right? They're trying to humanize their experience. They can't help being what they are, right? That this is all an attempt to dissolve that 18-year-old boundary that we all generally agree with, that we should all respect. And this is why they're pushing sexuality on children, because that boundary of saying, hey, listen, we don't teach sexuality at all, whether it's straight, gay, or whatever, to children. Now they're trying to push that boundary. They're trying to dissolve that boundary. So, this goes deep. This goes all the way down to our kids and the safety of our kids. And I'm just watching as the boundaries of our society are dissolving right in front of my eyes, and I cannot stand it anymore. So that's my rant. Anybody can jump in.
Yeah, I think one of the main ways they're doing it too is they're pushing on boundaries, but they're also setting it up to where the bad guys are the ones who are always in disagreement. Like, there's no specific narrative that's the main one at any certain given time. It's a bunch of them all entangled, and they always have to shift it to the population of people who are in disagreement, whether it's mandates, vaccines, gender, whatever the case may be. But that's how they push those boundaries, and that's ultimately how they tear them down.
I came across something the other day, so I'm not going to claim that this is mine, but I've adopted it. And essentially, to whittle it down to just a few words, the phrase I came across was, death is announced when the heart stops beating. So why isn't life announced when the heart starts beating? And I found it to be extremely profound. And I've been thinking about this actually for several days now. And it's completely correct, with the exception, of course, oxygen, which still is supplied through the mother's bloodstream. So if death is announced when the heart stops beating, then life is present when the heart starts beating.
Chris, you want to add anything?
Man, it's been very in depth. I don't know if I have anything to add to that. That was good.
All right. This is about the time where anybody who wants to add their 2 cents to the conversation, they can request to speak. I'm going to add someone right now. Philippe. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi, Adam, and thank you for holding the space. No
problem.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of cool keywords so far, like values and truth and boundaries. And well, I'm all about culture, and the thing about culture in the West right now is that it's been hijacked by by a certain orthodoxy, and the problem here is that these all the complaints that I've been hearing, which I share, are sort of augmented by the fact that the culture that we now inhabit, the arts and entertainment that are being presented to us on a daily basis, don't have any respect for any of those, for truth and values and whatnot. And that's a real shame, because art is supposed to be the pursuit of truth through beauty, right? That's the goal of culture, regardless if it's here or in China or in Africa or whatever. And the more we let it sort of corrupt its own nature and be something that's more about ideology than the pursuit of truth, then the more we'll pay later. Because culture, it takes a long time to make. Films and books and television, they take years to make, and they have a huge impact on our society, because, well, anyone can enjoy culture, right? It doesn't, it's for all level of ages and income, and regardless of education as well. So so we have to be mindful of what we're throwing at our children, especially because this will have a rippling effect down the road, and something that we might not like. Tickle was talking earlier about her nephew, and I don't know how old he is, but if he grew up as a Gen Z, well, then he's a product of this culture that we've been having for the past 10, 15, 20 years. And so imagine if a young man is like this today, imagine what the young men and women of tomorrow will be. So I think we have to heed that warning and do something about culture as soon as we can.
All right. Thank you. Does anybody want to respond to what he was saying?
I'm noticing when I'm looking at some profiles here, and we seem to have a lot of podcasters. So I hope what you're absorbing here will be shared with your own audience at some point. We, you're absolutely correct. And my nephew is now 21, 22. And as I say, he just got engaged to a girl. So the event that he wanted to upstage for his own ends would have been for naught in the long run, and ultimately a zero-sum gain for any kind of family event to announce his initial intentions, and just standing firm and essentially just saying, no, you're not going to do this, was quite big. But in the long run, I look back and I wonder, did I do anything there to help him understand that that was what appears to be a temporary moment or a fleeting feeling? I don't know. And as it stands right now, I have no additional feedback to give you, because I have none other than I was told he recently got engaged at Christmas. So it does ultimately display, though, the act of standing up and saying, no, I'm not going to let you cross that boundary. And this goes back to, what Adam was saying about boundaries. We, even on personal levels, societal levels, government levels, employment levels, everywhere we look, boundaries, massive boundaries, have been just annihilated, to use this word that we're with tonight. And how to restore it is the big question. How do we reestablish those boundaries? We have to be brave, and we have to run the risk of what we feel will be our own cancellation for speaking out and speaking up. And whether we do that on a singular level or a group level within our places of faith or just within our place in the family. And there's a bravery here that needs to be established, and to stand up and be that person, as ugly as it might seem initially, but to be that person that stands up and says, no, no. And most of last year I ran a hashtag campaign, which was just hashtag no. And it was used by some very big, prominent political figures in our Twitter community. And that's it. It's just no, which is one of the smallest words that we can use, but it has the most biggest impact. And again, we have to establish our own level of bravery within our own lives and how it affects us. And remember that it does affect us on a personal level. So these group choices and changes and switches and tolerances do affect us. And when it does encroach upon our lives is when we do have the right to say no. And we've forgotten our rights while we're trying to be forced into respecting everyone else's.
All right. Thank you, Tickle, for that. Before I go to James to speak, I wanted to remind people you can listen to this conversation and previous conversations if you go to agoodfaithspace.com. They'll bring you to the YouTube page. And eventually this will be up on there. So subscribe to the page and listen to previous conversations. They're all pretty enlightening and they're cordial conversations. So I would appreciate that. I'm going to add James Carpenter. You can unmute yourself.
Hey, Adam, did you just go to me?
Yes, sir.
Cool. Thanks for having me up. Just wanted to make a quick comment on nihilism and what comes after nihilism. So you look at these people with no lives that hunt down so-called racists and institutions, and you wonder, what is fueling that? And you might make the conclusion that it's nihilism, because these people are so full of hatred, they're so entitled, they've been raised to think that they're important. But I have been thinking a little bit about this concept of saviorism, where people see their current nihilism as a means to saving the world and preparing a way for the future society that they believe in. These nihilists do believe in something, but they accept their role as annihilators of the current evil structure. So just don't give them the credit for knowing that they're annihilating something. They don't deserve that. They need to feel pity for believing in their own saviorism over the traditions like, the spiritual traditions that we've been looking at for 2,000 years. So nihilism is the precursor to saviorism.
Very interesting. Yeah, it looks like Hardhat and Kris had to jump off. So it's just you and me, Tickle.
We're on it.
All right. That inspired a lot of thought. And James already knows I'm deep into the saviorism topic right now. Tickle, did you want to make a comment in regards to that?
Yeah, I have no idea why, but I was actually waiting to hear from James, and I'm glad that he stepped up to speak. Saviorism. Well, again, I'm going to go back to the act of saying no, because the act of saying no could be a form of saviorism, depending on how it's viewed. The person that is suicidal and holding them, whether it be physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, or otherwise, That's an act of saviorism. And there are, but essentially we're still saying, no, don't do that. The act of no really needs to be reinvigorated as a form of somewhat saviorism, but without, being the preachy teachy kind of savior. But just to show I care and I'm concerned for you is also an act of no. So, we've got to look at what exactly is saviorism and how do we encompass that into the occasional, well, actually, the very common act of saying no, because it's dangerous. We teach our kids don't touch the stove because it's hot. Don't blow on your food because it's going to burn your mouth. Don't stick your hand in the barbecue grill when it's been turned on. Those are all acts of no, but we're not realizing that at the time. But those are acts of no that comes through kindness, consideration, concern, and fear the other person is going to hurt themselves. So, to reinvigorate the act of no in its singular form, I do believe is a kindness as opposed to a cruelty.
And I'm going to go to Stella in just a second. But the way I kind of see it when it comes, the difference between like saviorism to me is interjecting yourself unnecessarily, believing that you can save. Generally, it's a population of people or society. It's usually on a bigger scale, but they do it person by person. And they think doing trying to save this one particular person is contributing to saving that group of people or this society or something of that nature. So I see saviorism kind of from that narcissistic viewpoint. Helping someone is different. And so, saying no is an act of defiance in many ways. It's also setting your ground and boundaries as well if someone's trying to get you to do something that you don't feel comfortable doing. But if it's someone that you love that is attempting to do something that could be harmful, I think you're trying to help them by telling them, no, you should not do that, right? I've had friends ask me questions and I'm saying, no, I don't think you should do that. I don't think I'm trying to save their life. I believe I'm trying to help them, because they're asking for my help, or it's a legit moment where I should interject to say like, you're in danger, that kind of thing. But I think saviorism is a mindset as well. It's an all-encompassing type of situation. So I'll go to Stella. Stella!
Hi.
You beat me to it. You beat me to it.
Hey, everyone. I'm a little late and I'm probably not up to date on exactly everything you guys are talking about. But I did kind of want to say that, I think as a whole, we've really dropped the ball as far as parents, um, and not necessarily us, but as a general populace. And to be quite honest, who are we really to interject our beliefs on someone? And I get that you want to help someone and guide them in what you feel is the correct direction. But your direction of correctness may not be something that they need in their life at that particular time. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you've just delivered. Absolutely. And I'm not in any shape or form saying that I'm in charge of how people should behave. What I'm saying is I'm in charge of how people behave with me and around me, and how they behave with things and events that affect me. I am allowed to have an opinion on that, and I am standing up for my own rights as an individual to say, no, not around me, and no, because that will affect me. And I don't have to always be giving in and surrendering to these indulgences that are demanded by others around me and in my circle, in my family, in my life, and in employment, whatever. And I am perfectly within the boundaries of my own beliefs. And when I am saying no, I'm not going to put up with that. I'm not going to tolerate that you're crossing a boundary, and I'm uncomfortable. And I've actually started using these key phrases in return to some others. I've said, well, you're labeling me. Well, you're labeling me too. You're labeling me racist. You're labeling me a hater. You're labeling me as anti this, anti that, anti the other. But all I'm saying is, I'm not comfortable with this, that, or whatever the heck it is that you want me to indulge you upon. Indulge you with, I should say. And I am within the boundaries, and we're all allowed to do that for ourselves. Because again, some of the reasons we say no is based on danger. And we've got 4 or 5-year-olds that supposedly know that they're transgender, but yet we're still having to teach them, some still being taught how to tie their shoelaces. Some still need to learn not to put their hand near the oven. So these are the crosshairs of where we're at. Are we supposed to indulge a very selfish parent, in my opinion, of saying, well, my kid is trans at 5, when you're still teaching that 5-year-old how to tie their own shoelaces?
No, and I'm complete agreement with that. Absolutely complete agreement with that. And I'm not trying to play devil's advocate. They are coming at us with the exact same opinions or beliefs. And I guess it's how do we let them know that, I mean, the things that they are doing is, I mean, I cry on a daily basis. I mean, you can watch it on television. It's absolutely disgusting. You've got little children trying to put masks on baby dolls. You have propaganda out the yin yang about something that doesn't work. These hokey pokey flippin' jabs. You've got Fauci. I mean, you're trying to lay the groundwork for a functioning family that gets it and understands. But then when there's, susceptible to being out in quote unquote the real world, and it's like they're just hammered with so much information, and you almost got to reel them back in, and you don't want them out there for that. And my children are grown, so I can only imagine what it's like for people that have like 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds. I mean, the ages where these children are the most impressionable. Where do we reel it back in? How do we reel it back in? I get you start at the ground level, but oh my goodness, there are just some people, it's mind blowing to me, I guess. So I think that's more the reason why I'm here, is to, kind of gather that information and have a backup plan for not just my children, because again, they're grown, but when my children have children, or I know that my neighbors have small children, they're being subjected to this kind of propaganda. What do you do? How do you combat that?
So what I'll do is I'll jump in here, and by saying you can only control what you can control. So I don't like the level of propaganda that's happening on television. I don't like things that are happening in in this country. But I can only control what I can control. This is why freedom of speech is incredibly important. Once that dies, then the level of influence that people like ourselves have starts to die as well. That's why the attacks on Joe Rogan are so baseless, but they're about controlling narrative. Um, he's having conversations with people with different viewpoints. And right now, that is being seen as a threat on our society. But whose society, right? Not the average American. The average American doesn't give two shits who Joe Rogan talks to, right? It's about certain people within our society who doesn't want this to happen. And so, you can affect the people that are around you. Someone like myself has decided to speak out to try to affect other people that are willing to listen to what I have to say. But my voice can only go so far. My actions can only go so far. Your actions can only go so far. And there's only so much that you can do, and you have to accept that. So you either do more to reach out to more people that are around you, be a positive influence for them, um, but understand that you're going to have limitations just like me. I can only have so much effect on people. That's just the way things go. The other thing I would also say is the narrative is breaking. So all the things that you're concerned with, the narrative is breaking. It's falling apart. It's taken a while. It was looking bleak, but the narrative is breaking about all those things that you're talking about. And the good thing is that I'm watching parents across the country who are fighting back. I'm watching parents across the country who are pushing back against certain things happening towards the children. You go after people's kids, people start to wake up and they don't like it. And that is what's happening. It's a small revolt that's happening within our country where parents are starting to wake up, including myself, about certain things that are happening within our schools, what's being pushed towards our children. And we're finally saying something about it and we're talking about it. And so I'm generally an optimistic person. I think the narrative is breaking, the activists are losing ground, more and more people are getting tired of it. And so at some point, we'll gain footing again and we'll have a level of sanity. Um, pragmatic, Pragmata, do you want to speak? I saw that you just removed your request. I was just about to add you. I'll add you as a speaker. If you want to accept, you can. I guess he.
I'd love to hear from Ginny if she'd like to step up.
Jenny, you want to speak? I'll add you. I don't even know if Jenny can speak. She's probably drinking Starbucks
Oh,
and
there she
driving
is.
the car. Oh, there she is.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yep.
I've just been really enjoying this conversation. The whole thing has been really good. Tickle, you said some really great things that I've been agreeing with. I think this whole nihilism thing ultimately stems. I mean, I'm a Christian. Everybody who follows me knows that. But I think there's just a spiritual decay, and I think that we need to cover that more as we move forward. People, in the music industry, like Bryson Gray, he has an album coming out this Friday, Us versus the Industry. And I just think, it's us versus the industry, it's us versus the government, it's us versus Big Pharma. Candace Owens is posting a lot of stuff about Big Pharma. Oh, did I lose you guys?
No, we
No,
hear
you
you.
heard
Oh,
it.
I was just saying that Candace Owens has been posting a lot of stuff on her Instagram stories that y'all need to follow about Big Pharma. It's us versus a lot of things, and I think that a lot of people, like the nihilism thing, I think a lot of people turn away because it's hard to confront all of this stuff. But I'm really proud of everybody, the whole panel tonight, talking about it and not being afraid to talk about it. People, people need to pay attention to what's going on, and I think focusing, on a religion will help you have the strength to do that.
Okay. I appreciate it, Jenny. Let's get to Pragmata. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
One thing I thought of is just as a possible sign of hope is that I do think that this whole phenomenon, it is a symptom of something that is very attractive to youth. I remember I was thinking specifically of when I was in high school, and I was very attracted to certain, I would say, left-leaning sort of social justice type of things. This is going back a long time ago, though. This is going back to like early 1990s. And I remember specifically, I was a big fan of U2, and I'm sure you know that Bono is one of these people who has really kind of made a sort of sort of an image of a savior complex. They've really taken the sort of political dimension, very far for pop culture. Now, of course, this is pre-woke, but this was always around. There was even if you go back to the early 90s, there was Rage Against the Machine, incredible self-righteousness, incredible, and it fills a void for young people. And that's where I see this connection with denialism is in the past, 10 years or whatever it is, there is been a lot of crisis in our culture. And so this is a tendency that young people have, and they're drawn to the purpose of some kind of cause to, social justice cause to right wrongs. And this fills a void of meaning for them. And it's just happening on a much larger scale that is much more pathological at this moment than maybe it was, 25 years ago or, whatever. And so I think to some degree, many of the younger people who are very drawn to this will naturally sort of age out of it. There's evidence that, people, like in my own case, people kind of, very drawn to social justice movements when we're younger. And then as you get older, you get a little more wiser about reality and you get more conservative. And I happen to have a 5-year-old myself right now. And of course, I'm very concerned, going back to what somebody mentioned about, how difficult it is with that, thinking about their future. But point being just that I think to some degree, some of it will ebb, just with people aging, although I don't know for sure, how much that will tamp it down, But I think that almost all of these things are really tied into just a void of, of an absence of meaning that a lot of the people who are attracted to this have. And, making, turning your kid, trying to make your kid trans. I mean, this is actually, for these people, I think it is a kind of religion. They're finding purpose in this. I think even this even the vaccine evangelists, versus everybody else, it actually has an evangelical feeling to it. Like for them, it is a mission. It's not even about the science. I think we all know that. but all of these things, they have, this is what I think is very frightening, is that they have the character of kind of an alternate, kind of religion, which is why it's so difficult to communicate with these people, because they don't even want to really have dialogue, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I guess this is more about discussing, the big picture of what we're actually facing, and at least I do think to some extent there is some we can hope that some of the people drawn to this will kind of age out of it. And of course, also depending that other things, we have to hope other things go in a better direction too, economically and so forth, that, helps to support things going in a better direction for them and for us also.
Okay. Tickles, did you want to respond to what you said? You still there?
Yep, I'm still here. Sorry about that. Yep, sorry.
It's okay.
I apologize. I was just taking a drink of tea. Yeah, it. I think the majority of us, we understand our own moral compass, and that's what drives us. And it's that moral compass that is being assaulted on all levels. And we're being told that it's wrong to think this way. It's wrong to act that way. It's wrong. Every which way it's wrong. Doesn't matter what it is. Every which way is wrong. And I believe James shortly when he was doing his short speech, when he said that that it's coming at us at a level of where these teams of people who claim they don't believe in anything actually do believe in something, which is my very first opening dialogue. But what they believe in ultimately will end all forms of life as we know it, and certainly reproduction. Certainly, if they become, and I hate to use the term they, but if they become the majority and we become less and less and less, and even lower than a minority, but become a minuscule instead of a minority, then that means all forms of human life within the next couple of 100 years will be gone. Will be absolutely gone. Because of course, all this transgender and surgeries and so on and so forth. Where does future life lay at that point? And of course, everybody's always saying, think about the kids. Well, I'm somebody's kid too. We're all somebody's kid. Whether we're grown up or not, our mothers still think of us as a kid, regardless of our age. So when everyone says, think about the kids, well, I'm one. Why is no one thinking about me? Why is no one thinking about you? And one thing we've forgotten to do is to look to the hierarchy of our elders, who certainly over the last 3 years have been horrendously violated in the most egregious ways, of not just being ignored, but censured and silenced out of our communities, and we're not taking care of them at all. And I do a lot of volunteering with a whole bunch of senior citizen groups, and I see it. It's awful. And we, while we're constantly looking at the new generations, we're forgetting about the ones above us. And my focus is majoritively on them. And I enjoy them. I enjoy them tremendously. I go to a residential Veterans Association home just about every Sunday. I bake goodies for them. Yes, of course, they get fed, but there's nothing like home-cooked food. And I have great conversations, and I learn so much from them. And that's our job as elders in our community. And even at the age of 40, I apparently am an elder in the community. So, that's what a lot of societies still do. They respect their elders, but we're not teaching the younger generations to respect us. again, we're going with this conformity because we're scared, we're nervous, we don't want to stand up, we don't want to cause trouble, we don't want to be seen as a curmudgeon, we don't want to be seen as the ugly relative, we don't want to be seen as people use the term racist now when there's not even race included. We don't want to be labeled as a negative person. And maybe it's because I'm a redhead, I don't know. I really don't care. Because this is where we're at. We're at the junction of these massive decisions being forced upon us. And it's nothing to do with communism, because actually under communism, homosexual relationships are not allowed. So, all of these kids that are, raging about, socialism, communism, blah, 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 let's bring it. We all need it. It's equality. Well, it's not equality. It's not equality in any sense. And you'll never get equality under socialism. Ever. Ever. Because it's all about the haves and the have-nots. And that's it. There's no in between. And you will do what the government tells you to do, and that's it. Otherwise, you're done. You're doomed. You're out. And when I love it when young people, get onto this bandwagon of how great socialism is and say, well, why don't you go and do a semester in Venezuela? Or try and get a semester or a volunteer job in any of the Chinese provinces. Just give that a whirl. Or maybe go volunteer in Cuba. And just learn about it firsthand instead of thinking that all of this is going to be so righteous and wonderful, because it's not. And again, this is where I draw the line in the sand. And I'm one of few people that will speak up and stand out and tackle it head on. I have no qualms over speaking and saying the exact same things that I'm saying right now to people's faces. And whether, I'm considered to be quote unquote ugly soul or an ugly person, then so be it. But again, these are my boundaries, and no one will cross them until I let them. And we're letting people crunch and cross all over us. And we do have to stand up, and we do have to stand out. And we don't have to sacrifice our own morals and standards and opinions in order to satisfy anyone. Whatever the topic might be, we're brought into this world to be intelligent people. And whether that's intelligence via education, of a school nature, or whether it's intelligence via experience and longevity. We're intelligent human beings. Yes, we breathe because our brains tell us we have to breathe. Everything else after that is voluntary. And we have to understand that on a deeper level. This is the way that we've been made. And to learn about one another, for sure. I have no qualms with that either. But where are the people that are supposed to be learning from us? Because I'm very, very happy to learn from the ones above me.
Well, you said a lot there.
Sorry.
No, I meant that in a good way. Don't worry. I think it's appropriate to maybe draw the line here as far as this particular conversation. I don't want this to go too late. So I appreciate everybody who's been listening. It's been a pleasure so far. Tickle, do you want to have like one quick final final word? I can't speak before we head out.
Well, thank you, and I'm very blessed, and I'm extremely grateful that you brought me onto another one of your panels. I'm extremely flattered. Thank you that you consider me to be a voice to share. The biggest thing that again I would just like to impart is that I can't remember who said it. I am as I am, so I am who I am. And yes, if we're being forced into respecting others' wishes and choices and desires, then we need to be equally as forceful about ours. And don't be scared. Don't be shy. Don't fear. We're living in worlds of fear. Fear that our government is taking over our lives. Fear that the economy is taking over our lives. fear that our employers are taking over our lives. And, you know, the biggest lie is fear. The biggest fear is a lie. And it's all a lie. And it's a manipulation of our morals and our codes and our standards for our lives. And it's dividing us like never before. And this is where we have to meet the divide and say, enough of this. Be strong, find some strength, go read some books to learn how to do it if necessary, and how to guide yourself into a stronger place. And, you know, this is something I've actually considered writing myself, that with all the other things I have on my plate, writing a book right now is not there. But there are choices to be made. And while everyone else is making their choices, they're not making the choices for me. And that's what the word choices mean. And when people say, well, it's a personal choice, don't forget that the word person is in personal choice. So therefore, I have a personal choice too.
All right. And I'll give my final words. I think that it was stated just before, but I think a lot of the nihilism aspect revolves around finding some sort of purpose. I think it's easier to convince younger people to kind of give up on society. And I agree with actually what James said, you know, to give up on society the way it's constructed now. However, if you choose to be a savior and change society for the betterment, then that's a different thing. It's a lot easier to convince them that the society isn't what it's cracked up to be when they're at an age where they don't really have anything as of yet. You know, I think there was a generation of kids who were told to go to college just cause, get a degree just cause. And with the expansion of the amount of kids who can enter college, online schooling, for-profit schools, you know, getting a degree is less impactful than it was, a couple generations ago. And so now we have kids who were sold, just get an education, come out, and you'll make 50, 60, 70, $80,000 a year, which is not likely, to say the least. And so I've met some of these people who've gone and got their master's degree and come out and like, why did I even do all that stuff? You know, I followed the directions, I did everything I was supposed to do, and now they're just defeated. Um, you know, I think that's a terrible way for our young people to enter the world as adults with incredible amounts of debt, completely distrusting of authority figures, you know, including their parents who told them to do X, Y, and Z, and they did it. And it was a lie. They were let down. To look at our government and see the unfairness, and then get push propaganda about how they're privileged. Meanwhile, they don't feel privileged. So, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to this particular conversation. I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation. And I'm really appreciative of everybody who's been staying in and listening thus far. That's pretty much all I have to say for tonight. Thank you again. Join us next week. Different panel, different conversation, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard next Wednesday. And Tickle, once again, thank you for joining me.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for the invitation. It's been a great experience, and I've enjoyed hearing other viewpoints. And my expectations are always high when it comes to you, and you never fail. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Everybody else, have a great night. Stay safe. And thanks for listening. Talk to you guys later.